Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to be reading some chilling Reddit horror stories. So sit back, maybe grab a snack and a drink, and settle in as we dive into these spooky events. One more thing, I'd appreciate it if you guys liked and subscribed, as it means the world to me. It shows that you want to see more content, and it helps more than you know. So, anyways, without further ado, let's get into it. I looked for a girl missing in the woods. This case still haunts me. A girl went missing in the woods. Her name was Mary Silverton. She was 22 years old. We looked for months and only ever found one of her boots with her left foot inside. I was part of the first search for her. Leading us was a senior park ranger, Nathan Crooks. Everyone said he was a great guy, and after I met him, I had to agree with them. It had been 2 months since her foot had been found. Even Mary's parents had lost any hope of finding her. I overheard the two discussing if there was anything left for them to keep searching for. The search had been called off early due to the heavy rain, and Nathan asked if I wanted to come over for a drink. I said yes. We had gotten along for the past several months. When you spend hours searching the woods together every day, you find ways to make conversation. After 2 or 3 hours and several more drinks, he confided in me. He told me he had been at this park for 20 years and had never failed to find anyone, alive at that. He told me people went missing for a few days, maybe a week. Hikers that had taken the wrong trail or stayed out too late and lost the trail in the dark. They get home safe in the end, and he puts up a few more signs. He told me he felt like he was responsible for what happened to Mary. He had tears in his eyes, and I comforted him. I told him that it wasn't his fault. It's that sometimes accidents happen and people go missing to never be seen again. He went silent, so did I. We sat and drank in silence for a while, and then he asked me a question. I can still hear it clearly now. He asked me if I really thought Mary would ever be seen again, if I thought we wouldn't find her. I said yes. I wish I could be glad that I was wrong that night. 3 days later, Mary's parents called off the search. It had only been them, myself, and Nathan for several weeks, so I wasn't surprised. Then life went on. I never spoke to Nathan much after that. 14 years went by. One day at work, I got asked to do a welfare check on the 58-year-old Nathan Crooks. Nobody had seen him in town or heard him from over a week. I drove to a familiar one-story home and knocked on the door. No reply. I knocked again and called out. No reply again. I checked the handle to find the door unlocked. I knocked a last time and prayed for a reply. Once none came, I opened the door and stepped inside as the pit in my stomach grew. I saw Nathan lying face down on the kitchen floor. He was dead. Stroke. No foul play involved. Completely ordinary. The only thing odd was I heard a faint banging coming from upstairs. I looked a while. I waited for an ambulance to arrive, but I couldn't find the source of the noise. I never noticed the hatch in the attic. It was several weeks later that the body of Mary Silverton was found in the attic of Nathan Cook's home. She was now 36 years old. She had only been dead for a few days. Starvation. Her mouth was gagged. She was missing her left foot. I taught my dog to use talking buttons. What she told me terrified me. My dog Cookie is a high-energy Palpatinian mix with big furry ears and tufts of long fur. When I first adopted her, I almost returned her because of the first 3 days she wouldn't stop crying. Now, of course, she is my baby. One thing that helped me a lot with her energy and her constant boredom was the buttons. I'm sure you've seen them. Those buttons you record with your voice that dogs can press to say things like food or play or outside. Some people even train their cats with them. Cookie is up to 20 buttons. Sometimes she'll hit nonsense sequences, of course, and then she seems to think, ouch, is a reaction to surprise. Also, I'm not sure if she grasps the emotions mad, sad, and love you. Though, on days when I'm curled up on the sofa crying from the stress at work and she hits love you, of course I want to believe she knows what it means. Even if she doesn't, it still makes me feel better. But, even though she's imperfect in talking with her paws, Cookie is well trained and intentional, at least with her most tangible wants like outside and food. Though, I'll admit, it's annoying to be woken in the middle of the night with demands for food, food, food. Anyway, one night I was woken up by the sound of my recorded voice from the living room. Stranger. This was followed by pattering of Cookie's little paws, followed by stranger. outside. I admit, my heart skipped a beat. I lay in bed, huddled under the blankets, reluctant to get up and investigate. For a long while, holding my breath, I lay there in silence. I listened to the dog's footsteps meander around the room. Finally, she pressed food a few times before coming back into the bedroom and curling up in her bed by the nightstand. In the morning, I checked around outside the house but found no traces of anything unusual. Also, did a Google search and laughed when I realized how many people have been spooked by their pets pressing stranger. I also creeped myself out with a story in the Daily Mirror of a woman whose dog pressed cold stranger. According to the article, the woman was spooked by her dog's warnings of this cold stranger in the corner of her living room. But in my case, Cookie wasn't warning me of any ghost. One morning, she hit stranger before running to the door and growling. This was a correct usage of the button as a UPS driver was outside. When the doorbell rang, she actually barked, something she rarely does. Her hackles raised, tail down, and ears flat. I had to apologize to the driver as I accepted the package, and Cookie kept rumbling, low and deep in her throat. I told her to go away, and she sulked off behind me somewhere. I heard the button for stranger again. Sorry, I told the driver, who was laughing. She doesn't like strange men. She sounds smart. Then, do those buttons actually work? He was intrigued. Outside. Yeah, she seems to know them pretty well. Food. Mad. Sometimes she presses them kinda randomly too, I admitted. Okay, well, she sounds mad and like she wants food. Have a good day. I don't know what Cookie's history was before being adopted, but she's always been leery of men, at least until they've bribed her with her favorite thing, food. In any case, later that afternoon, she pressed stranger again, and when I looked outside, there was a turkey in our front yard. That's when it struck me the other night. Cookie must have seen a raccoon or some other animal that was a stranger to her. But then came the incident that made me rethink everything. I'd just come back from a visit with my parents, and as soon as Cookie and I walked in, her hackles raised. I was unloading bags when I heard, stranger, home. This sent a crawl of icy fingers up my spine. Cookie wasn't growling or barking. She was unusually alert. Stranger where? I asked. When Cookie just looked at me, I repeated myself. She looked around the room, and then she trotted off to wander through the kitchen, came back and went down the hall to the bedroom. Came back to me and wandered over to the buttons. Smell. God, the chills I felt then. Did this mean there was a lingering smell of some stranger? Could it have been a strange animal? A squirrel that got in the house through the window maybe? Or the smell of something I brought in from outside? When walking around the house, no signs of forced entry, though I do keep a key under the flower pot that anyone with half a brain and determination to break in could possibly find. It's a safe neighborhood, so I hadn't thought much of it. Now, though, I removed the key and decided I'd get a lockbox for the front door instead. After I found a footprint in the damp soil below the window, I also decided to install cameras. Cookie, meanwhile, had calmed down, and when I came back inside, I found her camped beside the food button. But the real reason I swear these buttons and how beneficial they can be is because of what happened to the next week. I was out doing some gardening and heard my name called by Greg, my supervisor at work. He was out jogging, and we struck up a conversation. He asked if we could have some water, and I let him in for a drink, and as usual, Cookie was growling, tail tucked and ears back, just like the delivery driver. I told her to go away, and she backed off, though wouldn't stop giving Greg the stink eye. He had made himself at home in the armchair by the TV area and was remarking on what a nice place I have and asking, "Is it just you here?" When I heard my recorded voice from the living room, stranger, smell. Now the fact Greg had appeared on my street, casually jogging on the sidewalk, well, it had sent some red flags. He'd always been a little creepy as a supervisor, not enough to go to bring a compliment forward or anything, but enough that I felt awkward about seeing him on my street. So when Cookie pressed the button saying she smelled a stranger, it sent a pulse racing. Could this be the same stranger she smelled on the day I found the footprint outside the window? I told Greg I had to take her out for a quick potty break, and while outside, I phoned a friend and asked them to pretend it was an emergency. I came back in with my friend shouting loudly enough on my phone for Greg to overhear, and I told him something had come up and I had to run. We both went outside, and I locked up and got in my car and waited until he was gone before I went back inside my house. I checked the cameras, wondering if I'd find evidence of him snooping around my house, but there was nothing. I assumed that my fears had been overblown, that maybe I had freaked out at Greg unfairly, and Cookie had pressed those buttons because she didn't like men. But 2 days later, the cameras caught him. On a Saturday afternoon, when my car was gone and I was obviously not home, Greg came strolling up my sidewalk. He looked around, seemingly trying to act casual, then he went right up to the potted plant, which he lifted, searching for the key. I felt nauseated watching the footage, and I'm glad I had trusted my gut and Cookie's warnings about the bad vibes I was getting from him. I arranged to have the locks changed and security system installed and informed my neighbors to be on the lookout. I did some extra button practice with Cookie to make sure she'd alert me if necessary. When I informed my boss, Greg was immediately let go. He sent me some expletive-filled threatening emails and messages accusing me of ruining his life before I blocked him and filed a restraining order. That was all weeks ago. But the reason I'm writing about it now is because yesterday Cookie hit the stranger button again. Of all buttons, the one she always got a reaction of me immediately got up and asked her stranger where. She turned in a circle and whined, then pressed home. That sent a pulse through the roof. I checked through the house. No signs of intrusion. Nothing on the camera either. My fluttering heart slowed. No stranger, I told her. She sulked and wandered away. She was out of sorts the rest of the evening. Then today she hit the button again. Mad, she pushed. Then stranger, mad. It was nonsensical. I found myself trying to piece together meaning the way so many other owners do when their dogs use buttons in the way that doesn't make sense. She was calling me a stranger because I haven't given her enough treats or pets lately, as in, don't be a stranger. But I knew she was a huge stretch. Was she saying she was mad because I wasn't listening to her about the stranger? Maybe. But there was no stranger. I checked everywhere, including the cameras. And then beside the button, in particular, always got me extra freaked out. I looked up Greg just to make sure he hadn't resumed stalking me. I went to his socials where it was clear from his recent posts he definitely still held a grudge. He made a bunch of rants blaming me for his life spiraling ever since he's lost his job. Other posts claimed he had nothing left to live for, but the part that chilled me to the core, I found his obit. He ended his life 2 days ago. I will never use chatroom ever again. This story happened about 10 years ago. At the time, I was a boy in middle school. Probably 8th grade. I remember one day after school, I went on my computer that was in my room and joined some online chat room. I would play around on chat rooms from time to time, usually with my friends. But I was just bored after school this time. I remember chatting with some random people for a while, and then I started talking to a girl that said she was in high school, and she seemed pretty nice. I stopped joking around and had a pretty normal conversation with her. I asked her where she lived, and we happened to live in the same state. Then she told me that she lived in a town that was not too far away from mine. I thought this was a nice coincidence. We talked for a while, and she told me to start messaging with her on Kik. Kik was a popular messaging app back then, so of course I had one. You could have a profile on Kik with a picture, so I was curious to see what the girl looked like. We switched our conversation to Kik, and I saw by her profile picture that she looked pretty good. We talked on there for about a week. I was excited that a good-looking girl seemed to be into me. I asked her for her Snapchat, but she said she didn't have one. This didn't seem weird at all to me back then because those were the early days of Snapchat, and I only had just made one a couple months before. Eventually, the girl said that we should hang out. Of course, I couldn't drive because I was 13, but she told me she had just turned 16 and got her license. I told her to come over on Friday, and I gave her my address. She agreed. When Friday came around, I was pretty excited. I got home from school and immediately messaged her. But when I didn't, she didn't respond. I waited and waited, but there was still no response. After a while, I grew impatient and realized she must have decided not to come. Then later that night, I looked on Kik again and saw that her account was gone. I was confused and a little disappointed. I figured she blocked me or something, but I wasn't all that mad because I thought the whole time that it just felt a little bit weird. I wasn't completely sure if she was even real or not. So I decided to just forget the whole thing. But a few days later, during the next week, out of nowhere, I got a message from her again. She said she was sorry that she couldn't make it, but something came up. At this point, I was pretty much over her. So I just said it's fine, don't worry about it. She sent me a smile face back and I didn't respond. I wasn't really interested to see if she would say anything else, so I turned notifications off for the Kick app. When I came home from school that day, I got into my room and noticed that my window was open. I always kept it shut, so I figured one of my parents opened it for some reason, and I closed it. I did some homework, and then played video games for the rest of the night. Then about 11, I went to bed. As I lay down and closed my eyes, for some reason I just got curious to see if that girl ever responded to me. I guess it just bothered me how her account was completely gone and then back again. I got my phone from the nightstand and opened the Kick app. I saw that I had about 5 messages, all from the same girl. As I read them, I started to get chills. The first one said, "Hey, I've decided to come over today." The next one said, "I'm here, where are you?" Then there was a picture of my bedroom, and then she said, "Guess I will just have to wait for you here." And then the last text, which was sent an hour ago, said, "Look in your closet." I felt like I couldn't move. I looked around my room to the closet, which was on the other side. The door was slightly cracked open, but I really couldn't see inside. I wasn't going to take any chances. I slowly was able to sit up in my bed, then I stood up. I couldn't help but stare at the closet door the whole time. As I started to walk, I only saw it slowly start to open. My jaw dropped. The door kept opening, and when it was open enough to see inside, I saw not a girl, but a full frown man. That was enough to make me run for the door as fast as I could. I ran out of my bedroom and down the hall to my parents' bedroom. I ran inside and closed the door. Then I woke up my parents. They were pretty confused, and then I told them there was a man in my closet. They got even more confused, but I was 13 years old, so my dad didn't think I'd make something like that up. He left the room and went to my bedroom. Came back a couple of minutes later saying that the man was probably gone, but he'd seen how my closet was messed up and my window was wide open once again. The police ended up being called. I was too embarrassed to tell them the story, so we all just assumed it was a random break-in. I went back on Kick to see that account was once again deleted, so I didn't think I would have been much help to them anyways. Nothing else happened after that. Well, that is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for watching all the way through. Links to the stories will be down below, so check them out, and thank you again for watching. Bye-bye.